everybody, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new Studio Monday video. I want to share this look at freezer paper. Have any of you ever used freezer paper before? This is a really handy tool that I find helpful in not only just crafting, but it's also helpful to other people also, including quilting, and if you know the name, freezer paper. It was actually originally used to be able to wrap food up in and put it in the freezer. But actually freezer paper has some really great benefits to working with it in the craft room. And I want to show those to you today. So this is a piece of 8.5 by 11 freezer paper that we carry at Simon Says Stamp. So this freezer paper is really great and easy to work with. It's small, doesn't take up a lot of space, but you can also, of course, use freezer paper that you might have in your kitchen. This is a box of freezer paper, Reynolds Freezel paper, and it's basically the exact same thing, but it's on a big giant roll. So this is really big and takes up a lot of space, and I actually really like the sheets better because they're just a lot more manageable. Alright, so for the freezer paper that I'm going to be featuring in today's video, this freezer paper is, like I said, perfect for small spaces. Now, one of my favorite ways to use it is as a surface protector, so I can keep things from getting on my craft sheet that I don't want to create a big mess on. There are 4 other ways I want to show you how you can use freezer paper, and let's start with the first one, which is alcohol inks. Freezer paper, because it has that great slick coating on the one side of it, the other side is more of a paper coating. This is great for working with inks and other types of water-based mediums, alcohol-based mediums, such as the alcohol inks here. You can work with them on the freezer paper and reactivate them and then be able to work with them further. I'm going to demonstrate that here. So what I'm doing is I'm dropping some alcohol ink onto the freezer paper itself. This is the slick coating side of the freezer paper, and I'm dropping just a whole bunch of alcohol ink drops all over it. And I'm also going to take some of the alcohol blending solution. Now you could also use rubbing alcohol. Now if I'm going to use regular alcohol, I use 91% because it really gets the alcohol moving. 71% you can get some luck with, but I honestly would prefer the 91 if you're not going to get the alcohol blending solution. Now what you're seeing me do here is I'm smooshing this glossy paper into the alcohol inks that I've reactivated with the alcohol blending solution. And because that surface of the freezer paper is so slick and smooth, I can continually reactivate the color that is sitting on top of the freezer paper and be able to continually add more and more color on here. Now, like I said, it's also perfect for using as a surface protector. So I can go ahead and bring in my alcohol solution and more alcohol inks and drop things on top of this paper, really saturating it with a lot of inks. And the freezer paper is allowing the alcohol inks to stay only on the freezer paper. It's not soaking through to the outside of the freezer paper and then getting on my craft sheet. It's just keeping the whole entire surface of my desk clean. And I really love the benefits of that. Now, like I said, this is able to be reactivated. These alcohol inks are able to be reactivated because they're sitting on that freezer paper. So you're seeing me let some of this alcohol ink drip onto the paper. Now, normally you might just think, oh, we'll just throw that away. But no, you can reactivate this off of the freezer paper. Just bring in a little bit more of the blending solution and you'll get a lighter version of that color on your paper. And I can continually reactivate this over and over and over again, basically using up every drop of ink that's on top of there, adding more, taking more off, and you're just really working on top of this paper and it's not losing any of its durability. It's still keeping all of the ink only on that surface of the paper. It's not soaking through it all. You're just getting a lot of really great use out of this paper. So freezer paper is an absolute must-have when working with alcohol inks because it's really great for being able to get beautiful alcohol ink results like alcohol ink smooshing really easily, and you're not having a big mess left over. You can just simply toss the freezer paper or clean it off and save it for later. Alright, another great way to be able to use freezer paper in kind of a similar concept is with distress inks. Distress inks are a water-based medium, and on this freezer paper, it's non-porous, so the inks are just going to be sitting on top of here. It's very similar to a craft sheet. And so I can go ahead and put a bunch of this distress ink on top of the freezer paper, spritz it with a little bit of water to get it reactivated. And when you're doing the ink smooshing technique, you'll notice when the ink droplets start to bead up like this, That's when you know the ink is saturated enough to start smooshing with, and you can either add more water to get a more watery effect, or you'll get these great splatters like I have here. If I take this piece of paper and lay it into these droplets, you see we get this really great splatter effect. So freezer paper is great for being able to do ink smooshing, and you can get a lot of really great results with this. So I'm taking that same exact sheet of freezer paper, I've cleaned it off, and now I'm adding another color of Distress ink on top of it. And I'm going to repeat that step on these backgrounds that I'm creating here. And the freezer paper is holding up beautifully with all of that water that's sitting on there. It's not saturating the paper because, like I said, it's non-porous. So you're getting a really great surface to be able to work on, and you're getting a really great ink smooshing palette at the same time. Now I will mention that all of the projects that you're seeing me create in this video, I will have tutorials on all of these things coming up really soon with some projects featuring some Simon Says Stamp products. The only reason I didn't show you what I was doing here and talk about the processes that I'm using to create these different backgrounds that you're seeing here is because this video is teaching you about freezer paper, and if I tried to include everything in here, it would be an extremely long video. So stay tuned for my blog. You'll be able to see tutorials on all of these projects later on. Okay, so now, like I said, this is great for also protecting your work surface. So here I've got a background that I did some ink smooshing with, and I took a little bit of watercolors and I splattered that, and because the freezer paper was underneath of my paper, it caught all of the watercolor that was sitting on top of the paper, and I could easily wipe it up and clean it off, and I could reuse that sheet then afterwards, but it also saved my craft mat from getting really messy with a bunch of watercolors. It's a much easier surface to clean than the craft mat. So again, for Distress ink smooshing, very similar to the alcohol ink smooshing, we get some really great results, and it's a great surface to work on. Now, again with Distress inks, but you can also do this with other types of watercolors as well, you can use this as a palette. And it's really handy because it's white, so you're able to see the true colors of whatever type of watercolor you have put down here. Now you can use a water-based ink pad like these Distress inks, you could use zig markers, you could even use tube watercolors and squirt them out onto the palette. It doesn't really matter what type of watercolor you want to use. Either way, the freezer paper is perfect for using as a palette because you've got that nice slick surface, the water isn't going to seep into the paper, and you've got the true color showing up on this piece of paper as well. And you can even put your watercolor paper on top of that freezer paper palette and also have it serve as a protector for your craft mat too. Just like I had mentioned earlier, it's a great work surface protector, but it's also great for using in your craft projects. So here's an example of how I can wipe off this freezer paper and get a beautiful clean sheet once again and be able to reuse this over and over and over. So for watercoloring, you've also got a great tool here because you've got the non-porous surface that's perfect for adding watercolors onto and working right from. Alright, one more technique, and that is using freezer paper as a mask and being able to do some ink blending. Now, have you ever tried to make masks with die cuts and using maybe printer paper or cardstock, and eventually that die cut stencil just ends up wearing out and you have to make a whole brand new one again? And even sometimes it ends up wearing out halfway through your ink blending, and that's a pain. So I find that freezer paper is a perfect solution for creating die cut masks. Now I like to reinforce my die cut mask with the freezer paper by adhering the freezer paper with some double-sided sticky tape onto a piece of printer paper. That makes it a little bit more durable, but it's also not too thick to die cut with. So I did that with this particular mask that I'm creating with the Modern Flowers card wrap die from Simon Says Stamp. And I'm attaching this underneath of the actual die cut card wrap that I had created here. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I wanted to create an ink blended coloring of these flowers in the negative areas of this particular pattern. And when you open the card wrap, you still have that beautiful flower design showing through. So I reapplied the stencil design that I created with the freezer paper, and I attached it down and masked off the rest of the areas so that I don't get ink on the rest of my card, and I began to ink blend. Now here I'm using some shimmer inks from Delicata. These are really beautiful pigment inks and also really blend nicely, and I'm using an ink dauber to go ahead and apply these down. Now this mask is, like I said, made from freezer paper, and it holds up so beautifully, and you get beautiful clean results every time. So you can see this beautiful ink blended design we have now underneath of our die cut piece. Now you could do this, you don't have to put a die cut piece on top of it, but the concept of doing ink blending with the freezer paper masks is so handy, and this mask will last you quite a while. Now, also a really great feature about this is because that surface is slick, I can now take a damp rag and be able to clean off all of the ink that's sitting on top of the stencil, and it's perfectly clean and ready to use for another card. So there's a lot of really great ways that you can use freezer paper in your card making to help you do some really great techniques. I hope you'll check it out over at the Simon Says Stamp shop. I have links down in the video description below. You can also head on over to the blog to get more information on all of these techniques that I shared, as well as still pictures and the products used. I will see you again very soon with another video, and until then, thanks for watching!